Show me the money, Jerry Maguire famously told us. And there'll come a time in your speaking career where you start saying that as well, thinking, well, when can I make any money from this? As you begin out as a speaker, you'll be doing Facebook Lives, perhaps launching a YouTube channel, doing some stuff on TikTok, and you think to yourself, I'm sharing all this great content, but am I seeing anything in return for this? Because let's face it, that roof above the head doesn't pay for itself, does it? And you'll start to hear about these speakers who command what seem like astronomical speaking fees, getting paid 5 grand, 10 grand, 25 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand for a 90-minute keynote speech. How does that compute? It can boggle the mind, and you look at those speakers and think, how much are they worth, and how can they possibly command that type of speaking fee? I know I don't get paid anything like that for my speaking, and I look at speakers like that and think, how do they do it? But what they provide for us is a great example where we can look at them and say, why would event organizers even think about paying that much for a speech? And why can those speakers charge that amount again and again? What are they doing that's so successful and draws people to seeing that amount of money as worth it to get that speaker to speak to their audience? So that's what I want to talk about a little bit in today's video, looking at the breakdown of what does it take to be a paid speaker, and to be a paid speaker who can charge fees that at the beginning of your speaking career you think just aren't even possible. They just do not compute at all. We're going to start to break down those secrets of paid speaking gigs and start to compute it a little bit more in our minds. Getting one of these hallowed paid speaking gigs was a target for one of my speaking clients, EJ. She's the founder of a charity, and as such, she's very aware of how important money is in terms of just basic survival and keeping the lights on, but also how that money facilitates being able to do the things that matter, being able to create change in the world. And she felt that she could share a message that she could earn money for, and that money would help her to create the change that she wants to see in the world. When she started off working with me, she hadn't had a paid speaking gig before, and she was looking to find, how do I turn myself into a speaker who can get hired to speak and be paid a speaking fee? So together we did a lot of technical work. There was so much feedback that I was giving her, and in particular, this was at the start of COVID, and looking at, okay, why are people going to hire you to speak on camera? You're not even going to be there in person. Why would they hire essentially a hologram of you, a projection of you, to come and speak? And EJ was amazing. She just took on every single piece of feedback, worked it in, implemented it, changed it. And the turning point for her came around, unfortunately, not a great set of circumstances. With the murder of George Floyd and the attention of Black Lives Matter, EJ delivered a talk about the importance of Black Lives Matter. And she delivered this speech, and it got shared and it went viral. And in the end, that speech was shared on the Black Lives Matter official website. And that was a real turning point for her. It gained her exposure, and suddenly people saw that speech and asked her to come and deliver it in their organizations. She got hired for Her Majesty's Prison Service, the National Prison Service here in the UK. She got hired for the National Health Service, our National Health Service here in the UK. HMRC, that's Revenue and Customs. So she was talking with some massive organizations, sharing this speech, and most importantly, she was getting paid for it as well. One of her first speaking gigs, she got offered £300 to deliver this 60-minute speech. £300, roughly about $500 US. And she nearly turned it down. She was like, why would you pay me £300 for that? I don't get it. I'm just going to say no thanks. I just want to share the message and speak for free. And I was like, no. EJ, what are you doing? Take the money. They want to pay you. Do you know how hard some people have to work to get paid to speak? So she had all sorts of beliefs and interpretations of herself that she didn't think she was worth being paid to speak. And I can assure you from seeing her speak, she's worth even more than £300 for her speech. And what we had done over the month leading up to that opportunity was work on key aspects of her speaking that would make her worthy of being paid to speak. So when the opportunity came in a bit of a national and a global zeitgeist. It wasn't something you could necessarily plan for, but when the opportunity arose, she had the skills and foundation in place to be able to go and do those paid speaking gigs. And that's what I'm going to share with you in this video. 3 key components of what we worked on together, and ultimately what you want to have in place that makes the difference between speaking for free and being paid to speak. The first secret to being paid as a speaker is to be able to tell excellent stories. Stories are what separate you from every other speaker out there. Because no matter what industry you're in, most of the speakers in that industry are going to be saying the same stuff, aren't they? If you're in the health industry, most speakers are going to be saying, exercise more, eat less sugar, get more sleep. Nobody's going to be saying the opposite of those things, are they? If you're in the business space, people are going to be saying about the importance of marketing, about knowing how to sell a product, about having important brand identity. If you're speaking about relationships, it's going to be about listening, it's going to be about empathy. Speakers are talking about the same stuff, so it's not the stuff that makes you different, it's the way you package and deliver that stuff. And one of the key aspects of this is through the stories that you tell. Learning the art of telling good stories and collecting good banks of stories is one of the keys to setting yourself apart as a speaker. And that's something that me and EJ worked on throughout our time together, where she would come up with, and this was something that really set her apart, she would think of these metaphors and these parables that would allow her to communicate a message. And we looked at how she was telling them and say, okay, right, we need to speed up the pace here, we need to put a different transition in here, we need to take some time to focus and really settle into the emotion of this part of the story. And ultimately now she tells fantastic stories. And that's one of the reasons why she gets paid to speak. One of the most enthralling parts of speeches will be the stories. Those moments where that hush settles across the audience, where there's that intense focus and attention on what you're saying and where you are. Those moments usually come during the stories. And that's what people pay the big bucks for. Stories move people in a way that almost nothing else that you do as a speaker will be able to do. So the first secret is the art of telling excellent stories. If you tell great stories, people are going to pay you to speak. And these stories aren't just about telling these tales and almost like you're at some kind of party just telling people about your week. No, the stories have to have meaning to them. There has to be a point to the story. There's a reason why you choose that story over another story. The story does a lot of the legwork of communicating the emotion and the metaphor of a message. So when you start to talk a little bit more about facts and reality later on, people have the emotional grounding. They've bought into you because you've told the story, and then they're going to listen to the message. And that leads nicely onto point number 2, which is have a clear message. And I know that seems really obvious, but you'll be amazed at how many people speak, how many people will deliver a speech. And by the time you get to the end of the speech, if you ask the audience, what was that person's message? They either won't be clear, or you're going to get lots of different answers. If you're speaking to an audience of 100 people, by the end of the speech, you want 100 out of 100 to say exactly the same thing for your message? Well, their message was about taking your chances. Their message was about putting in the small, consistent work. Their message was about thinking about how you can help others. And as you can see with these messages, they're not complex. They're not even unique. They're messages that other people will have. But it's got to be clear. And it's got to be permeated throughout your entire speech. That message, phrases, and buzzwords and themes should be coming up again and again. Because ultimately, your audience, you'll be lucky if they remember 10% of what you say. I know that's such a discouraging thought to have as a speaker. You think, man, how much time did I put into preparing that? And they're only going to remember a fraction of it? That's just the way the human mind works. So you've got to make sure that the fraction that they remember is the important take-home message. Having that clear message that stems right throughout your speech. And the speech that ultimately set EJ off was, Black Lives Matter is an idea whose time has come. That was her message. That was why she told the stories she was telling. That's why she was sharing the examples she was sharing. That was the theme that came up again and again throughout that speech that went viral. An idea whose time has come. That's it. Simple message, but she gets paid again and again to share that simple message. And when people are looking at their account books, they want to have a really clear idea of what their money is going to get them. They want to have a clear end outcome, an end result, and that's why speakers get paid. Because if a solution is worth 100 grand, people will gladly pay 100 grand for that solution. If as a keynote speaker you deliver a really key message that answers a really key question or solves a really key problem, if that's worth 100 grand to someone, they're gladly going to pay for it because they know that it's going to be a good outcome for them. But if you don't have that clear message, if you don't have that clear outcome, why is anyone going to pay you when they don't know what they're going to get for their money? That's the importance of having a clear message. And it's a clear message that feeds on from those stories that you tell. You tell stories that enhance the message. And that helps with those 10%. That 10% that people take away will usually be an inspiring story that you told with a really key take-home message. As we start thinking about problems and solutions, this is where the third secret of paid speaking comes in. The third thing you have to do to get paid for your speaking is offer practical steps. And this is a mistake that a lot of speakers make. They come onto stage and they share these little anecdotes, they share some of their personal story, they have these buzzwords and messaging that come through, and then they just leave their audience with it. Can you imagine if I came on stage and I said, hey guys, in order to get paid for speaking, what you have to do is tell excellent stories, have a key message, and if you do that, you'll get paid for speaking. You'd be sitting there and going, right, okay, I mean, that's good to know, but what's the question that you have in your mind? How do I do it? How do I tell excellent stories? How do I make sure that my story has a clear message? How do I make sure that the 10% that my audience remembers is the 10% that matters? You've got to give your audience practical steps. So sharing with them, these are the key components of telling a story. This is how you thread your messaging throughout your speech. This is how you build a theme to your speech. Those are the types of things that I'll be sharing with you if this was a keynote version of this speech. And this is what EJ did so well. When she's talking about diversity, when she's talking about race relations, when she's talking about discrimination, she offers practical steps for what people can do to increase diversity, what people can do to reduce discrimination. She's grabbed their hearts with the story. She's inspired them to action with that clear message. But once you inspire your audience to action, you then got to show them the path that they go down. You've got to give them some steps. As speakers, we are leaders. And as leaders, it's your responsibility to show people the way. And it doesn't have to be the entire path. And in fact, if you show people the entire path, you're probably just going to discourage them and put them off. But you've got to show them the first few steps along the path. You've got to give them an idea of what's the one thing that you can do next. If it's summing up this secret at all, it's that phrase. What's one thing that you can do next? And that's what people pay for. Remember I was talking about earlier about how when the accountant's looking at the books and thinking, why are we going to separate ourselves from this money? There's got to be a clear outcome. There's got to be something that happens after people have watched you speak. Because if nothing happens, they might as well not have watched you speak in the first place. And you certainly might as well not have bothered separating yourself from thousands or tens of thousands of pounds or dollars. Offering your audience practical steps. That's the third part in this framework. And there you have it. Those are the simple things that paid speakers do really, really well. They tell excellent stories that grab their audience by the heartstrings. They're relatable. They show the context of what the speaker's trying to say. They have really key messaging and a really strong theme coming through their entire speech, so the audience leave knowing exactly what the message was, what's expected of them, what they're being challenged and encouraged to do. And after being challenged and encouraged, they're shown the way. They're given steps. They're shown the path. The speaker is a leader who takes their audience along a journey. And if you're able to do that as well, you'll get to be a paid speaker as well. And that 100 grand, 50 grand, 10 grand might look a little bit intimidating at the moment. And hey, you know what? It does a bit for me as well at times. But you can start looking at where EJ started her journey. £300, $500. In some kind of ways of thinking, you go, wow, that's a week's salary for some people. That's a lot of money. But it's not astronomical where you're thinking, how could I possibly be ever worth that? There's so many opportunities to find that type of speaking fee, to get yourself started, to get yourself onto the paid speaking circuit, and most importantly, seeing yourself as worth being paid that amount of money. Because if you have an amazing story to tell, if you have a powerful message to share, you are worth it. And if you need me to tell you first, then let me tell you, as my take-home message, the 10% from this video, you are worth being paid money. You do have enough value to be paid to speak. All you've got to do is follow the framework, build the foundations, and as Jerry Maguire said, the money will show itself.